Welcome back to our series on being still. We're studying the people of Israel as they're at the Red Sea and Pharaoh is coming after them. We talked about their fear that they had the last time, but I want to look at their response that they had when they were faced with adversity. If you look with me in chapter 14 of Exodus down at verse 11, and in verse 10 it says that the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord because they were sore afraid. But then they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. What an attitude. Can you imagine as they face this trauma, this trial, reacting in this way, knowing that God was going to take care of them and protect them? Yet they tried to take the situation in their own hands. Many times when we face stressful situations, we face battles, instead of sitting still and knowing that God is in control, we take those situations in our hands. First, we see that they questioned Moses' motives. They said, Moses, you just brought us out here in Egypt out of Egypt so we could die out here in the wilderness. There were no graves there, and our custom is to come out and be buried. And so you just brought us out here to die. Often we question motives of people where God's using them to lead us in certain directions and things aren't going right. We immediately go after them. You go after the people that are trying to help you. I know often our children think it's all the parents' fault. Mom and Dad, if you would have done it this way or that way, it would have been better. People of Israel, rather than trusting God, started accusing and questioning Moses. They then challenged Moses' leadership. They challenged the fact that they should follow him. They questioned the fact whether he was the right leader for them. We often take and stop following the people God's given us to follow because we get stuck in our own head. The devil starts renting space in our brain and we start battling ourselves. And anger and bitterness and frustration starts to come out. Then they had incorrect suppositions. They were starting to try to figure out why this happened. Why is this happening? And figuring out what's going on. And then they said, we would have been better off back with the Egyptians serving as slaves. How could you say that? I'm better off being a slave. But they got so fearful that they made these wrong thoughts in their head. Last thing I see is ultimately they forgot God's plan. They forgot what God wanted to do for them and deliver them. And he kept saying, I'm going to show what happens when you mess with God. I'm going to show Pharaoh that there is a God in Israel. Many times when we face a battle, it's only because God is setting the stage to show who he is. Show that he can do something amazing. Last week I was sitting down and pondering, looking at my bills and different things, and I realized there was a bill that I needed to pay, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to do this, and my mind was calculating 10 different ways, and I wasn't sitting still with it. I wasn't letting God take care of it in my mind. And I recognized it and I cast it out of my mind. And I sat back and said, I must trust the Lord. A few minutes later, it started to come back again. And I kept having to throw it out and say, you know what? God's taken care of me in the past. God's going to take care of me in the present. I don't have to worry about this. It was interesting. But later that same day, surprisingly, God took care of it. Now, I shouldn't be surprised that he took care of it, but I had no idea that the blessing was coming. But God that day had met that need. So many times, God is setting the stage to take care of things. We just have to sit back and be still so that God can handle them.